What's going on, everybody? We're going to do a recap of the entire day. Give me 15 minutes of your time. We're going to talk about a few different trade setups from today. Today was pretty weird. Today started off with the CPI data at 8:30 in the morning on the pre-market. And typically with CPI, you have a pretty volatile day. And typically with the CPI that we saw today, it should have been pretty bullish. It should have been a very one-directional bullish day based on that CPI data. We also had some other headlines that should have been pretty bullish. We had the trade deal with China finalized. We don't have any exact details just yet, but that was finalized today. Both of those headlines, most people would think are pretty bullish. So you would think that today would be up 100 points, maybe 150, right? Today was actually down, I think. Yeah, down about 12 points right now. So looking at today, we closed as a sweep of that prior high. We can see the candle right here. We closed below the prior high as a sweep and a bit of a top doji. Now, if we look at the last few weeks, we have been on a bit of a vertical distribution. We've been trending to the upside for since Friday, May 23rd on this local leg. Obviously, a lot longer if we zoom out, but just on this local up move here, since May 23rd, we've been going pretty much straight up. Now, obviously, that has a bit of chop as well, kind of a vertical distribution. So what I was talking about in Discord was with that CPI data that came out and that China trade deal being finalized, today should have been up quite a bit. All those bullish traders that have been waiting for this CPI data, they should have been buying today. If they're not buying today, when are they buying, right? So I was saying that if we don't see some buy pressure above like 60.50, 60.80 tomorrow, this might be the local top. Now, we do have some PPI data coming out tomorrow, so we could see how that comes out. But I would say if we don't close strong tomorrow, if we don't close above at least like 50 or 60, 6,050, 6,060, then we are probably going to be a local top for at least a few days. I'm not talking about a long-term top. I just mean locally. I think locally I could see this being the top and coming back down to 5,950, 5,900, somewhere around there. Same thing with NASDAQ. So NASDAQ closing as a sweep of yesterday's high, closing as a top doji here. We were up about a little over 200 points from where we are now before pulling back. We're down about 57 points on the day, a little bit over 0.25%. But same thing on NASDAQ. If they're not going to be bullish today with that CPI data, with that China trade deal coming in, then when are they going to be bullish, right? So we'll see how that PPI data comes out. If it comes out poorly, then look for around 21,500 or below. But this is not a look ahead type of video. We're just talking about what's going on today. Yeah, definitely a bearish close. If we look at the snapshot of the market, the bond yields were down quite a bit with our 10-year bond auction today, down about 1.78%, meaning the bonds are probably pretty green today. The dollar was down 0.5%, euro up about the same, USD JPY down about 1/4, Bitcoin down about 0.7, and gold was up about 0.4. So not a whole lot of movement, but the bond market is down quite a bit, which should have been once again. That should have been another bullish factor with those yields coming down. So a lot of things today should have been bullish, but it wasn't. That was basically the name of the game today. Should have been bullish, but it wasn't. Okay, let's take a look at candle by candle what actually happened today. Let's actually just jump into the order flow here. Let's jump into Addis and take a look at kind of what started the day. So we started off with the CPI print at 8:30. And typically what we look for with CPI prints, let me go to that candle here on the 30-minute as well. Typically what we look for with these CPI prints is they have a very large spike right out of the gate when that data comes out. A very large spike to the upside, very large spike to the downside. And then after that spike, typically 25% or 50% is pulled back. That's with a major spike, if it has a major move. I would say today was not a major move. If it's not a major move and it's only a small CPI reaction, then typically that entire print is retraced. Okay, so today we only moved from 42 all the way up to 74. Now, I was looking for possibly a 50, maybe a 75 point move on the CPI. I was thinking it was going to get closer to 6,100. That would have been a large move. So because the CPI move today was so muted, it was so lackluster, we were looking for that to retrace the entire CPI move, which it did. It retraced right around the open. So around the 9:30 open, we opened damn near exactly where that CPI low was. So we did retrace that entire move. Now, after the CPI move has been retraced, either 50% or the entire move, when you open up at 9:30, you have to ask yourself, was that just a CPI retrace, or are we actually going in that direction? Now, today, for the first part of the day, it was just a CPI retrace. We did not have significant sell pressure below that CPI. It tried to put in a lower low, which it did, but that ended up being a very large bull div, which I believe we talked about. What time was that? That was 9:47. If you go back to my morning stream, I'm sure we talked about that on the morning stream. But that was right around here. And we talked about that being a bull div, a bullish divergence on momentum. So we had a higher low on momentum, and we also had a higher low on delta. So not only was that a bullish divergence with the delta, it was also a momentum divergence, signaling that we should probably be bottoming there. After that, we had a pullback into VWAP. And after that pullback into VWAP, I remember talking about this on stream. I called this an inverse head and shoulders. So we had that left shoulder there, we had the head right there, and we had the right shoulder right here. So with an inverse head and shoulders, once you start holding above that neckline, which in this case would have been around 22,000, funny enough, that was our trade plan level as well. Once you start holding above that neckline, you begin to push in that direction. So that's when the vertical distribution started. That started around 10:09. So around 10:09, you just started a vertical distribution. And as you guys know, with the vertical distributions, they like to chop to the upside. They give you a lot of signals that they want to go down, bear divs, sweeps, sell pressure, whatever it may be. But it doesn't go down, right? You have those sell triggers that don't turn out to be great trades. Okay? And then we had a headline. Then a headline came out. So I can't remember off the top of my head what the headline was, but there was a headline around 11:07. If you guys remember, you can put it in the comments. I forgot what the headline was. But there was a headline that came out at 11:07, which led to that stairs up, elevator down, where you have that slow grind up, vertical chop, and then boom, straight down. And look at where it bounced. I mean, you can't make that up. Bounced off VWAP damn near to the exact tick. Now, normally we talk about the VWAP trades as a bear flag into VWAP. That's one of our favorite trades right now. When you have a sell-off, you have a strong impulse down, and then you have a slow climb back into VWAP. And then you sell VWAP, you put your stop loss above VWAP, and then you target the prior low. Now, this is an example of the bull flag into VWAP. Now, it's not exactly a bull flag. You kind of shot down very quickly instead of slowly pushing back down into it, but you would have traded it basically the same way, where you could have been a buyer on VWAP, stop loss below VWAP, and then targeting the prior highs. Now, unfortunately, you did not get the prior highs. So when we talk about what time was that? That was around 11:17. Let me pull that up on here as well. So when we talk about the bear flag into VWAP, I talk about you always want to be targeting the prior lows. And the number one thing you want to look out for that kills that trade is a higher low. So if we flip that into the bull flag into VWAP, the number one thing you would be looking for to kill that trade would be a lower high. Okay. So we start to establish a lower high around 1118. And then you have a real lower high, a local lower high, around 1124. And then 1125, we really start to sell off. I believe that was another headline, I think. But yeah, lower high there, which kills that trade. You do not have the lower high on NASDAQ locally, but you do have the lower high if you zoom out for that entire move. Basically, you just were not making it to your target. Your number one target is that prior high. And you just weren't getting there. You were stalling. So that's kind of where it told you to kill the trade. And then you started seeing significant seller delta. So if you didn't kill that trade, you would have killed the trade on the seller delta. And as long as you killed the trade properly, you wouldn't have lost money there. And that's when you began to flip into a downtrend. And you basically just stayed below that 24 EMA the entire way down. And I mentioned this in Discord. I believe I mentioned it on the live stream as well. When you did flip into that downtrend, we were just looking for a value retrace of yesterday. So once that downtrend started, we were watching that value high and that value low of yesterday. And then we finished that retrace on that 2 p.m. candle. So 2 p.m. was right around here. So we had this really significant sell candle at 2 o'clock and then one at 1:30 as well. And that finished our retrace of yesterday's value. And then after that retrace of yesterday's value, I believe, was it a, let me see here. I think there was a bull div there or there was a pivot there on that low. Let me see. Yes, there was or actually no, that was the 12 o'clock. There was a bull div one on the 12 o'clock move. Was there a bull div on the 2 o'clock move? There was. So there was a bull div on momentum on this 2 o'clock move as well. So if you're using the Momo indicator, we had a lot of bull divs on the lows today. So this low right here had a bullish divergence on the low. That move right there had a bullish divergence on the low as well. So that started to signal a little bit of buy pressure on that prior day value low. Okay, so we finished the value retrace, and then for 4 30-minute candles, we wicked that value low every single candle. So if you guys follow my sweep pattern, my sweep trade, those aren't exactly 30-minute sweeps. They're not sweeping the lows of the 30-minute candles, but they are sweeping that value low. So you could have used that value low as a good buy point and then putting your stop losses below those lower wicks. Probably not the 2 o'clock candle because that candle had a very large wick. So that would have been a pretty dangerous stop loss. But the candle at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and 3:30 all gave you some shallow wicks that you could have used a pretty easy stop loss with that sweep. And then on the way back up, they pushed back into, or they tried to push back into VWAP. You did get VWAP, I believe, on NASDAQ. Let me double check. No, you didn't. Yeah. So neither one of them got VWAP. They struggled. I think it was the POC node that I was thinking about. You did get the POC node. You did not get VWAP. So they retraced back into the POC and they continued to chop on the prior day's POC. And then today's POC came down to that 28 level, and it kept going back and forth between 28 and 23. And I talked about this in Discord. When you have these days where the value area is kind of one big node, the POC can shift back and forth very quickly. Instead of having those days where like the POC is a much larger node compared to the other nodes, if you have like smaller nodes throughout the day, and then you have like a very obvious POC, then it's hard to shift that node. But when it's all kind of one big node, then it's very easy to shift. And that's kind of what we saw today. And same thing on NASDAQ as well. NASDAQ came down, retraced yesterday's value. You didn't have all those sweeps, though. You only swept the value low. You bought off that value low of yesterday one time, and then you chopped around the POC. But going back to what I started the video with, look at today. We had a very good CPI. We had a very good headline, and we still retraced prior value. And this is after we had a significant retrace into this value, and we used it as support. So we had this overlapping value here. We broke out of that overlapping value. We came back to retest it on 2 different attempts and bounced out of it 2 times. And still, we retraced that value. That's a pretty significant sell-off. And then same thing on ES. We had this overlapping value. We came back to retest it at 9:30 and at 12 o'clock. Both of those attempts did bounce out of that prior day's value, and yet we still retraced that value. That is, once again, a bad sell-off. You do not want to see that happen after you've already used that as support. Okay. So going into tomorrow, we need to see some buy pressure pretty much right away, or this might be the higher time frames taking over on the sell side. But all right, guys, that is it for now. Hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.